Bringing up Bates star Erin Bates rushed to ICU with septic shock. It was a quiet, golden morning in Rocky Top, Tennessee, the kind of morning that always felt peaceful inside the Bates household. The soft light of the sun filtered through the kitchen window, painting warmth across the family's wooden table. Kelly Jo Bates was preparing breakfast, the smell of pancakes and fresh coffee wrapping the air with comfort. From the living room came the familiar sound of piano keys, gentle, full of life. It was Erin. She sat there as she always did, fingers dancing effortlessly across the piano. Her children twirled and giggled beside her, while her mother smiled from the doorway. The melody she played was one she had written herself, a soft hymn full of hope and light. It had become the heartbeat of the Bates home. That morning, Erin was more joyful than usual. She was getting ready to drive to Knoxville for a church rehearsal, something she loved doing. She spoke softly to her mom as she packed her music sheets, telling her how she felt blessed beyond measure. Kelly Jo watched her daughter with quiet admiration, a woman of faith, a mother of 4, and a heart that carried more grace than most could understand. Before leaving, Erin hugged each of her children tightly, whispering the same words she always did. "Mommy loves you more than all the stars." Her husband Chad kissed her forehead before she left. "Be safe," he said. She smiled, that gentle, unshakable smile that seemed to carry peace wherever she went. Outside, the morning air was cool, the roads damp from a light drizzle. The hills stretched endlessly, covered in fog that hung low and silver. Erin opened her car door, placed her music beside her, and turned on her favorite worship song. As she drove away, her parents waved from the porch just like they always did. For a while, everything felt normal, ordinary, perfect. On the highway, Erin hummed along to the music. She recorded a quick voice note for her kids, a sweet, half-sung message reminding them to behave and pray before bed. Her voice was calm, light, full of life. But somewhere between the mountains and the storm clouds, the road began to change. The rain came faster, heavier, until the wipers could barely keep up. The world blurred around her. At 10:47 a.m., witnesses say they saw Erin's car drift slightly across the yellow line on Highway 33. Another driver tried to avoid her vehicle. Tires screeched. Metal collided. The echo of the crash disappeared into the sound of the rain. For a moment, time stopped. Back in Rocky Top, Kelly Jo's phone began to ring. She answered it with the same calm tone she always used, but within seconds that calm shattered. Her face went pale. The cup in her hand slipped, breaking into pieces on the kitchen floor. All she could whisper was, "No, not my Erin." Gil rushed in, confusion turning to horror as he saw his wife trembling. The look in her eyes said everything. He fell to his knees, whispering a prayer that broke in the middle of his own breath. The Bates home, once filled with music, went silent. This was the morning that changed everything for the Bates family. A morning that began with music and ended with heartbreak. A day when Tennessee lost one of its brightest smiles, and a family of faith was left searching for strength through tears and silence. The rain refused to stop that day. By the time Gil and Kelly Jo reached the hospital, the world outside had turned gray, a silent, heartless gray that seemed to swallow everything in its path. Thunder rolled somewhere far away, echoing like the sound of grief itself. Inside the emergency ward, everything was chaos. Voices overlapping, footsteps running, the smell of antiseptic in the air. Gil held Kelly Jo's trembling hand as they approached the reception desk. His voice cracked when he said her name. "Our daughter, Erin Bates Payne. She was in an accident." The nurse looked up, her face pale, her eyes soft but filled with something unspeakable. She didn't have to say much. One look was enough. Kelly Jo's knees gave out. Gil caught her before she fell. Somewhere behind them, Lawson, Carlin, and Trace arrived, faces wet with rain and tears. Nathan was still on his way, driving as fast as the storm would allow. They were led to a small waiting room, the kind of room that holds more heartbreak than air. The walls were too white, the clock too loud. A single chair sat empty in the corner. Kelly Jo clutched Erin's scarf, the one she had left on the couch that morning. She pressed it against her face, inhaling it as if she could still hold on to her scent, her laughter, her warmth. Minutes turned into hours. Every sound from the hallway made their hearts stop. A doctor's footsteps, the sound of a curtain being pulled, the whisper of someone crying. Then finally the door opened. A young doctor stepped in, rain still glistening on his shoulders. He looked down, took a deep breath, and spoke with a voice that trembled as much as theirs. "Mr. and Mrs. Bates, I'm so sorry. We did everything we could. Erin didn't make it." The room froze. Kelly Jo's scream pierced through the silence, raw, uncontrollable, the sound of a mother's heart breaking in two. Gil just stood there, silent at first, then sank to the floor, his face buried in his hands. Carlin collapsed into Lawson's arms. Trace punched the wall, whispering over and over, "No, she was fine this morning, she was fine." Outside, lightning flashed through the hospital window. A white, blinding light that filled the room for a second, then faded, leaving only shadows behind. The storm raged on. But inside, the Bates family had entered a storm of their own, one that would not pass so easily. Kelly Jo refused to leave her daughter's side. When they finally let her in, she stood beside the still hospital bed. Erin's hair was slightly tangled, a small cut near her temple. But she looked peaceful, almost as if she had just fallen asleep. Kelly Jo touched her hand, whispering words that only a mother could say. "My sweet girl. You played your last song for heaven, didn't you?" Gil stood behind her, holding her shoulders, his tears falling silently. Around them the machines were silent now, no beeping, no alarms. Just the hum of rain against the window. As the family gathered, the hospital corridor grew still. Nurses stopped to bow their heads. Even strangers felt the weight of that loss. The loss of a woman whose faith and music had once brought so much light into the world. Hours later, when the body was taken away, Kelly Jo turned once more toward the window. The sky was clearing. Somewhere far beyond the clouds, a single beam of sunlight broke through. She whispered, almost to herself, "That's her. That's my Erin." And as the light touched the wet ground outside, it felt as though heaven itself was reaching down one final time to take her home. The Bates home had never been this quiet before. For years, laughter had filled every corner. The sound of children running down the hallway, Kelly Jo's warm voice calling everyone for dinner, Gil's deep chuckle echoing from the porch, and above all Erin's music, that soft, graceful piano melody that had always lived in the air like sunlight. But now there was only silence. The family returned home from the hospital that evening under a gray sky. No one spoke. The drive felt endless. Even the younger kids who didn't fully understand what had happened, sat still, confused by the emptiness around them. When the car pulled into the driveway, Kelly Jo froze. The porch light was still on, the one she had left that morning for Erin to see when she came back. For a moment she couldn't move. Gil reached over and gently took her hand, his own eyes red and tired. Inside the house everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Erin's cup was still on the kitchen counter, half filled with tea. Her music sheets were scattered across the piano, unfinished, waiting. Kelly Jo walked to that piano and touched the keys with trembling fingers. A single note rang out, sharp and hollow. It echoed through the room like a memory. Her voice broke when she whispered, "The house feels different without her song." Gil stood behind her, quiet and strong, but inside he felt the same storm. He had always been the protector, the man of faith who never lost his strength. But now, every verse he had ever preached about loss and heaven suddenly felt too real. The other children gathered slowly. Carlin sat beside the piano, holding one of Erin's scarves. Lawson stood near the window, staring at the darkening sky. Josie wept quietly, while Trace kept pacing back and forth, fighting to keep himself from falling apart. Erin's children, still too young to grasp the word forever, ran into Kelly Jo's arms. "When is Mommy coming home?" one of them asked. Kelly Jo froze. The question pierced deeper than any wound. She held them tightly, whispering through tears, "Mommy's home now, sweetheart. Just a little higher home." Outside the rain started again, soft this time, gentle, almost like a lullaby. The family gathered together in the living room. No one said much. No one had to. Then, out of the silence, Lawson stood up and walked toward the piano. He hesitated for a moment, his hands shaking, then pressed a key, just one. Another sound followed, soft footsteps. Carlin sat beside him, then Josie, then Trace. One by one, the Bates siblings surrounded the piano. Without words, Lawson began to play one of Erin's favorite hymns, slow, broken, but full of love. Kelly Jo closed her eyes. Gil took her hand. The melody wove through the room like a prayer. Fragile and trembling but alive. The song grew stronger, each note carrying the weight of their grief and their faith. As the final chord faded, the silence that followed didn't feel empty anymore. It felt sacred. Later that night, when everyone went to bed, Kelly Jo stayed behind. She lit a small candle and placed it on the piano. The soft glow reflected off the polished wood, the same surface that had once shimmered under Erin's hands. She opened Erin's notebook, her songwriting journal, and found a half-written line. Every song ends, but the melody lives on in heaven. Tears blurred the words as Kelly Jo whispered, "You knew, didn't you, baby? You always knew how close heaven really was." The camera of memory would stay fixed on that scene. The candles flicker, the empty piano, and the mother who refused to stop believing. That night, as the rest of the family slept, Kelly Jo placed her head against the piano and prayed. She didn't ask for answers, only for strength. Outside, the wind carried the faint echo of a melody, almost like Erin's music finding its way home again. That was the night the Bates family learned what silence sounds like when love is still present. A silence that doesn't destroy, but teaches you to listen. Because sometimes the ones we lose don't stop speaking, they just change the language. The days that followed felt endless. Morning and night blurred into each other, separated only by the sound of the wind through the Tennessee hills, and the whisper of prayers that never seemed to stop. In the first week, the Bates home became a gathering place for neighbors, friends, and church members. Meals came in baskets, flowers arrived in silence, and hugs replaced words. Everyone wanted to help, but there are some wounds that kindness can't close. When the crowds faded and the last casserole dish was returned, the real silence began. Kelly Jo spent most mornings at the piano now. She didn't play, she couldn't, but she cleaned every key as if polishing them could bring Erin back. Some days she would find a stray music sheet under the bench and press it to her heart, whispering the lines like a prayer. "I'll keep your notes alive, sweetheart," she said one morning, her voice trembling. "One day I'll play again." Gil, usually the family's strength, had become quiet. He still led prayers at dinner, but sometimes his voice broke halfway through. At night he would sit on the porch, staring into the dark fields where fireflies flickered. He thought about every sermon he had ever preached about heaven, and for the first time, he wasn't sure if he had truly understood it until now. Inside, the older siblings were finding their own ways to breathe through the ache. Lawson spent nights in his small recording studio. The first few days he just sat there, guitar in hand, unable to play. But one night he started writing. The words came slowly, like tears finding their way down his face. The song would later be called "Letters to Heaven." "If words could fly, I'd send them up to the place where angels keep your cup. Tell you I'm fine, though I'm barely whole. Heaven has you, but it took my soul." He recorded it in one take, his voice cracking through the final verse. When he finished, he sat there for a long time, staring at the microphone, whispering, "That one's for you, Erin." Carlin found her strength in Erin's children. Every afternoon, she brought them to the piano. At first, they only touched the keys out of curiosity, pressing random notes, laughing through their confusion. But slowly, she began to teach them the songs their mother had written. The first time Brooklyn played a simple melody correctly, Kelly Jo started crying in the kitchen. The music that had once felt lost was living again, through the tiny hands of Erin's daughter. Josie began creating scrapbooks, pages filled with photographs, lyrics, and pieces of fabric from Erin's old dresses. She said she wanted the little ones to remember the color of their mom's laugh. Trace helped her gather the pictures. He couldn't talk about Erin much, but he could build frames, fix shelves, and keep his hands busy when words failed him. Every Sunday, the family gathered outside near the big oak tree where Erin used to sit with her guitar. They started something new, a ritual they called Letters to Heaven. Each family member would write a short note to Erin, a thank you, a memory, a line from a song. They placed them in a wooden box Gil had built, sealed it, and set it beneath the oak roots. No one spoke while writing. Only the sound of paper, the breeze, and sometimes a child's quiet sniffle. One Sunday, Kelly Jo read her letter aloud. "You taught us to see beauty in small things, Erin. Even in sorrow I still see it because of you." Gil placed his letter next, whispering, "You showed me faith isn't about never crying. It's about holding on even while you do. When the box was closed, Gil prayed, not for answers but for peace. The wind picked up, and a single leaf drifted down onto the lid. Lawson softly began to sing the chorus from his new song. One by one, the others joined in until the whole family was singing, voices shaking, faces wet, yet something in the sound felt stronger than pain. As the camera of memory would linger on that image, the oak tree, the letters, the family holding each other, it would feel as if the heavens themselves were listening. That night, Kelly Jo stood by the window and looked up. The sky was clear, the stars bright. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. "She's not gone," she whispered. "She's just home." And somewhere beyond that sky, maybe a familiar piano began to play again, soft, steady, and full of love. Time passed, but the world didn't feel the same. The seasons changed in Tennessee. Spring flowers bloomed again, birds returned, and the air smelled of rain and life. But inside the Bates family home, every sunrise still carried the faint ache of what was missing. For weeks, the piano stayed silent. Dust gathered on the keys, sunlight touched the wooden surface, but no melody filled the air. The instrument that once connected every heart in the house had become a quiet monument to the woman who once played it. Yet even silence in time begins to stir. One morning, Brooklyn, Erin's little girl, climbed onto the piano bench. She pressed one key, then another. Her fingers stumbled, but her face lit up. The sound was clumsy, but it was real. Kelly Jo, standing in the doorway, froze. For a moment she couldn't move. Then she stepped closer, tears forming in her eyes. "That's your mama's song," she whispered. Brooklyn looked up and smiled shyly. "Can I finish it, Grandma?" Kelly Jo's voice broke. "Yes, baby. Finish it for her." And in that small moment something shifted. The music that had been lost began to live again. Not through perfection but through love. That evening, Gil sat on the porch, Bible in his lap, listening to the faint piano notes echo from inside. He didn't speak, but his heart did. "Thank you, Lord," he prayed silently, "for reminding me that even through loss, your melody never ends." He thought about all the sermons he had preached about faith, about heaven, about endurance. None of them had prepared him for this kind of pain. But in the rawness of grief, he had learned something deeper. That faith isn't about never breaking. It's about being broken and still choosing to believe. Weeks turned into months, and healing slowly became part of the Bates family's routine. Lawson released his song, Letters to Heaven. The world listened. Thousands of people wrote to him, saying the song helped them grieve their own loved ones. The comments filled with hearts, tears, and gratitude. One woman wrote, "Your sister's story reminded me to call my mom again." Lawson read that comment out loud to his father. Gil smiled faintly and said, "That's Erin's ministry living on, son. She's still touching hearts." At the church, Erin's friends started something new. The Erin Bates Music Scholarship. Every year, one young musician from their community would receive a grant to study worship music. The first recipient was a shy girl named Alyssa, only 12 years old, who played the violin. On the day of the award ceremony, Kelly Jo stood on the church stage, her voice trembling but strong. "My daughter loved God through her music," she said softly. "She believed every note could be a prayer. And now those prayers will keep spreading." The crowd stood and clapped. Even Gil, who rarely cried in public, wiped his eyes quietly. At home, the oak tree where they had buried their letters had grown fuller, greener. It became a sacred place for the family. Not of mourning anymore, but of peace. On Sunday afternoons, they gathered there with picnic baskets, laughter, and songs. The little ones would run barefoot around the roots, shouting and singing. Sometimes, Kelly Jo would close her eyes and listen. And in the sound of wind through the leaves, she would almost hear Erin's voice again. Warm, steady, full of light. "See, Mama? I told you I'd never stop playing." The day would come when Gil stood again at the pulpit, his voice sure and calm. The church was full. The topic that morning was, the faith reborn. He spoke not from notes but from memory. "We all walk through storms," he began. "Some take away what we love most. Some leave us on our knees. But I've learned something. Faith doesn't mean the storm will stop. Faith means you keep walking even when it rains." The congregation was silent. Many were crying. "My daughter Erin used to say," Gil continued, that every time she played the piano she felt like she was touching heaven for a second. Maybe that's what faith is, a touch of heaven, right here in the middle of our pain. He paused, looking out across the faces before him, then added softly, and if you listen closely even now you can still hear her song. At that very moment, Lawson began to play letters to heaven quietly from the piano behind him. One by one the congregation stood, not in grief this time but in reverence. The sound rose through the church, the same melody that had once belonged to Erin, now carried by hundreds of voices, hands lifted, hearts healing. And for the first time since that tragic day, peace filled the Bates family home completely. That night, as stars glittered above the Tennessee hills, Kelly Jo wrote one final letter and placed it beneath the oak. You gave us music, Erin. But more than that, you gave us faith. We're still singing. Just like you wanted. She smiled, brushed a tear from her cheek, and whispered, "Good night, my girl." The wind blew softly through the trees, carrying her words into the night, a lullaby for heaven to hear. Years passed, but the memory of Erin Bates never faded. The house in Rocky Top was alive again, not with the same melodies as before, but with a deeper, steadier kind of music, the music of resilience, of faith, of love that refused to die. Kelly Jo often sat in the same chair by the piano, watching her grandchildren play. Sometimes their fingers stumbled, sometimes they pressed the wrong keys. But each note they struck reminded her of Erin, her laughter, her songs, her unwavering spirit. She would have loved this, Kelly Jo whispered, a soft smile forming through the tears. Gil looked on from the porch, the golden sunset casting long shadows across the yard. His hands, once callous from work and prayer, now rested lightly on the railing. He thought about all the sermons he had preached about faith, endurance, and the power of love. But Erin had taught him the deepest lesson of all. That love doesn't vanish, even when the person is gone. The older children had grown into adults, each carrying pieces of Erin within them. Lawson had become a recognized musician. His song Letters to Heaven played on radio stations and streamed by thousands who found solace in it. He traveled the world, but every performance ended with a small dedication. For Erin, whose music still guides us. Carlin continued teaching piano, ensuring that Erin's children and the next generation of Bates' children could feel her presence in every note. Brooklyn had grown confident, learning to play the songs her mother once composed, and sometimes in quiet moments, she would hum a melody no one else remembered. A song that belonged to Erin alone. Trace had become the protector of family memories. Every photograph, every scrap of paper, every journal Erin had written in was preserved meticulously. He often sat under the oak tree, reading her words aloud to anyone who wanted to hear, keeping her voice alive in the hearts of all who listened. Even Kelly Jo found her strength renewed. She had learned that grief is not about forgetting. It's about carrying the love forward. Every Sunday the family would gather beneath the oak tree, leaving letters, prayers, and flowers, a ritual of remembrance that had become a symbol of hope for the community. "She is here," Kelly Jo said one afternoon, watching her children and grandchildren laugh beneath the branches. "Not in the way we touch, but in the way we live. In every song, every smile, every prayer. Erin is still with us." One evening, the family gathered for a small concert at their home. Neighbors and friends filled the lawn, soft lights twinkling above. Lawson performed Letters to Heaven, Brooklyn joined on piano, and Carlin led the younger children in harmonies. Gil and Kelly Jo sat together in the front row, holding hands. The music rose and fell with the night breeze, each note carrying love, loss, and healing. Those who listened felt a presence that was both tender and eternal. Erin's spirit seemed to be there, guiding the melody, reminding everyone that even after tragedy, life can still hold beauty, joy, and purpose. After the concert, Kelly Jo and Gil walked to the oak tree where they had first placed Erin's letters. The wooden box, worn by time and weather, still held the prayers of a family who refused to let grief define them. "She gave us more than music," Gil whispered, brushing his hand over the box. "She gave us each other. And that is forever." The wind rustled through the leaves, and for a moment, it felt as if the trees themselves were singing, a quiet, sacred melody. It was a reminder that Erin's love, her music, her faith had become the legacy of the Bates family. Eternal, unbroken, and alive in every heart she had touched. And as the stars began to appear above Rocky Top, The family looked up together, hand in hand, feeling her presence not as absence but as light. "We miss you," Kelly Jo whispered softly. "But we carry you," Gil replied. And in that quiet night, the Bates family understood the deepest truth. Love never ends. It only grows. Time has a way of softening pain, but it does not erase love. Years after that fateful morning in Tennessee, the Bates family still felt Erin's presence in every corner of their home. In every laugh, every song, every prayer. The house was alive again. The piano stood polished, its keys waiting patiently. And though Erin's fingers would never play them again, her spirit resonated through the music of those who loved her most. It was a warm evening. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky with streaks of gold and pink. The family gathered one last time for a tribute. Not a mourning but a celebration. Friends, neighbors, and church members filled the yard. Candles flickered softly in the breeze, casting a gentle glow over everyone. Lawson stepped forward first. Guitar in hand, he began to strum the opening chords of Letters to Heaven. His voice shook, raw with emotion, but each note was carried by love, not grief. One by one, Carlin, Brooklyn, and Trace joined him. The younger children played small percussion, tapping lightly, clumsy but earnest. Kelly Jo and Gil stood together, holding hands, tears streaming silently down their faces. Every note, every word was a message to Erin. A song of remembrance, of gratitude, and of unbreakable faith. As the music filled the night, Kelly Jo closed her eyes and felt her daughter beside her. She remembered Erin's laughter, her gentle hands on the piano, the way she had always said, "Music is our way of touching heaven." And in that moment it felt true. The melody floated into the night, carrying the love of a family that refused to let tragedy define them. It soared into the stars, and the Bates family felt, more than ever, that Erin was there, smiling, guiding, and forever part of their hearts. After the song ended, the family gathered beneath the oak tree where they had buried their letters for Erin. Gil knelt first, brushing his hand over the wooden box. Kelly Jo followed, placing a single white flower atop it. "You taught us to love without limits," Kelly Jo whispered. "To live with faith even in pain. And to find joy, even when our hearts are broken." Lawson, standing beside her, added softly, "Your music never stopped, Erin. It's in us. It always will be." The youngest children scattered petals around the tree, each one a symbol of remembrance. The wind carried them upward, swirling through the branches, as if the sky itself was joining the tribute. Night fell, stars twinkling above like tiny lanterns in the heavens. The Bates family stood together, hand in hand, feeling Erin's love surround them. A love that death could not touch. "We miss you," Gil said quietly, voice thick with emotion. "We always will," Kelly Jo whispered. "But we carry you," Lawson added. "And your song will never end," Trace finished. For a moment silence reigned. A profound, sacred silence filled with memory, hope, and the warmth of family. Then somewhere in the distance the faint echo of a piano note seemed to rise, soft, perfect, eternal. The family looked at one another, tears and smiles mingling, and they understood. Erin's life, her music, her faith had become their guiding light. Her melody would live on in every song, every laugh, every prayer, every moment of love. And in that quiet Tennessee night, under a sky full of stars, the Bates family finally felt peace. Because some songs never end, and some love never fades.